And we started going down to Needle Rock quite a bit. The Sinkyons kind of considered the backyard of the Whale Gulch community, and I had always enjoyed going out there, but got really, really attached to that whole area of Bear Harbor. Whale Gulch School used to start their school year with a week's camp trip at Bear Harbor. Back in the day when you could drive right into Bear Harbor. They take the whole school there and figured the kids haven't seen each other for the whole summer. Let them work out all their social dynamic while they're camping before we try to get them into classrooms. And I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever heard. And we just camped at Bear Harbor for the first week of school every school year. I got very attached to the place. So yeah, from Whale Gulch, let's see, I ended up leaving there about 10 years. I taught there for about 10 years and left there when Jan and I had started to develop, as Bryceland High School folded, we started to develop wild iris forestry, which Jan was, it was really his brainstorm. He wanted to work in the woods. He was had enough of working with teenagers at that point and decided that it might serve him better to work with the forest. And so in working with stand improvement, you know how the land here has been so trashed at that point by all the logging that had happened. It was in such dire need of work that he started just doing stand improvement and fire hazard reduction on our own land in Bryceland at Hokahay. And in splitting the wood, we were selling firewood out of that. And in splitting the wood, he realized he was like splitting a madrone round one day and realized, like, this is just too beautiful to turn into firewood. I wonder if there's a way to turn this into more product. And started researching. He had heard that, like, Malcolm's in the 50s had been developing tan oak and madrone as flooring and siding and had been making product and milling it and working with a kiln. And well, he went down to UC Berkeley's Forest Products Lab and did all this research and came up with kiln schedules and all of Malcolm's old research and work and kiln schedules, and came home all excited and said, I want to start a business where we actually make product out of the wood that we're taking out of the forest. And so it was really quite a brilliant concept of adding value through remanufacturing of what would have been scrap wood or firewood into product that could be sold in the community. His idea was, let's make product that adds value through remanufacture and that we can sell here rather than selling the logs outside of the community. And so that was kind of the basis of wild iris forestry, and we did that for several years. He really needed my help in terms of the business, which I didn't really know what I was doing either, but he was really not a business person. And so we kind of limped along, figured out together how to throw a business together and make this work. And then realized that we were doing more educational work around it than it was like taking away from the actual running of the business. We didn't have time to do both. And so the Institute for Sustainable Forestry came out of that as a project that could do more education and research and development in the community, with wild iris as the model business that could be used. The idea was that Jan's idea was that every neighborhood should have a little wild iris forestry that works in their own watershed, and that all of that wood should be processed in a larger facility in southern Humboldt. So we had this vision that never quite manifested. We did make quite a bit of flooring, as some of you know. I'm sure there are people with tan oak floors in their homes from those days. The Mateel Community Center was all wild iris wood that was just all harvested right off of Elk Ridge in a fire hazard reduction stand improvement project that we had done for a neighbor. And so it was pretty exciting. In the meantime, Jan got cancer and died at the age of 44, very young, for prostate cancer. As it turns out, he had been exposed to Agent Orange and also to radiation when he was in the service as a very young man. He was working on the detonation of nuclear warheads and exposed to all kinds of radiation. And so prostate cancer took him at the age of 44 in 1991. We were together for about 11 years when that happened. Bryce was turning 6. Bryce was 5 when Jan died. He was right before his 6th birthday. And that's when I realized what an amazing community this is, I think. I really got it when Jan died, how much, the 2 years before he died, he was very ill. I was nursing him. We had amazing help even before our Heart of the Redwood Hospice was here. The community just rallied to help me and to support Bryce. You know the expression that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it really was true with Bryce. I can't say enough for this community. I don't know how I could have done it without the people that took Bryce off my hands. Some of my land partners, as well as just little friends of, he was at Children's House at the beginning, so some of his little friends, his parents, just stepped up and they'd take Bryce. Luckily, he was that kind of kid who would go home with anybody, really. As long as they had something fun going on and a friend, he was happy to go with them. So he spent a lot of that time, that last year before Jan died was very, very difficult. And a few years afterwards, I was still trying to keep Wild Iris alive. I was still teaching in Whale Gulch and had this little child that I was now single parenting. The stepgirls were getting older, and Jessie and Sibel. Sibel was off fighting fire. She actually became a hotshot firefighter, one of the first women in California doing that. That's where she was when Jan died. We had to kind of wait for Sibel to find her way back to us. We got her word before we could bury him. But yeah, the community was absolutely amazing and really rallied around that whole period of time and supporting me in my single parenting. And then eventually I kind of got it that I couldn't do it all. I couldn't continue teaching and running Wild Iris and directing the Institute for Sustainable Forestry. No, there were wonderful people that had taken that over. In the meantime, I got involved in the yoga path, Standing Wave Yoga. The yogi that ran that organization had moved here, and I was getting involved in that. And he kind of helped me to see that I really wasn't doing anything really with quality, and that something had to give. I had to give something up there. And as it turned out, it was Wild Iris. My first love was really teaching, and although I so admired and respected Jan's vision, and the whole thing was just, I was very, very involved in running that whole organization, and it was just too much. So I ended up gifting Wild Iris Forestry to the Institute for Sustainable Forestry so that they could continue to run it as a demonstration project, and just stepping back completely from my activism in forestry, and got to go back into full-time teaching at Whale Gulch at that point. And the years went by, and I like I said, I was at Whale Gulch for 10 years, and then left Whale Gulch, subbed for a couple of years in the community, and then a neighbor asked if I would be willing to look at a job teaching with Mattole Valley Charter School, who mostly so that I could work with their homeschooled child, who they wanted to have an official teacher for. And so I decided to look into that, and I did. And I ended up teaching for that school, that charter school, for about 20 years, or a little bit over 20 years. We ran an independent study program for homeschool kids in Southern Humboldt. At first I taught K through 12, and then K through 8, and then K through 6. With a few exceptions for a few friends who had junior high and senior high kids. But I did that for quite a few years. We had an office in Redway, and that was very rewarding and wonderful work, working one-to-one with children. Still got to do all the cool curriculum design that I wanted to. Still tried to work with my original model of starting with the child and seeing where they interfaced with what the state standards were and needed. And I felt like I was pretty successful in that. It was got challenging as it went on to, the Common Core standards and all the standardized testing and all of that became pretty required to be able to continue to work for the charter school. I had to be enforcing a lot of things that I didn't necessarily completely get behind. Became a little bit of a conflict for me, but I still very much enjoyed that teaching and pretty much had autonomy in Southern Humboldt to teach how I wanted to for the most part. And in the meantime, got extremely involved with standing wave yoga. It became a spiritual path as well as the physical hatha yoga. At some point down the line, I began teaching standing wave yoga as well. Bryce grew up into the teenager and ended up leaving the community and moving to Arcata when he was 15 and going to Arcata High School. And the partner that I had at the time also decided to move away, and I found myself alone for the first time, really, maybe ever, and realized that it was kind of a setup for me to really get involved into my own spiritual path and to really take the yoga much more seriously than I had. It was, I think, to go back a little bit, I realized with Jan's passing that everything happens for a reason. That as difficult as it was caring for him and losing him at such an early age, such a young age for him, years later I realized that it was really for the best for me, and that the direction that it catapulted me in terms of my spiritual path never would have happened if Jan had stayed alive. And as difficult as it was, that was what it was. And I realized that everything really does happen for a reason. Even if it's not what I want in the moment, it's still what's supposed to be happening for me and for everyone, I believe. But to see it for myself. And so I got very involved with standing wave yoga. For about 20 years, I think I was teaching for about 15 of those years. And it got to a point where the group and the yogi became stifling for me. I think there was as wonderful as it was, and as much as I got from that yoga path, there was also a sort of built-in arrogance and sort of cultish flavor to the group that I was very much in the center of. And I started feeling that. I started feeling the judgment of the yogi, as much as the path taught non-judgment. There was quite a bit of judgment actually going on toward me, and I was kind of taught in that sense that judgment toward other people that weren't doing what we were doing, and realized very painfully through hurting people, through that arrogance, that it wasn't my path any longer and I needed to step away from it. And so I did about 10 years ago, stepped away from standing wave, and was able to, hold on to a lot of the tenets of it. They call them tools for enlightened living. A lot of that is still very much a part of my life, and the spiritual path of really feeling guided by God and by the reality of what's so as what is supposed to be happening for me. I still very much am in that place spiritually, and had a kind of severe yoga accident, yoga injury, pretty much right after I stepped away from the group. Within maybe 6 months, I hurt my back very severely doing yoga and had to stop teaching the standing wave. and lost my own practice for quite a while. I couldn't do any yoga at all. And in that place of realizing, well, this is what's supposed to be, I just need to pay attention to get the lesson from this, had to really take a look at my own arrogance and my own questioning of who I am. If I'm not the yogi, the yogini, then who am I?